Alrighty, so finally time to get back on the gold car. So this just came in yesterday. So this is the correct Floor Innovations fuel hat for the SN95. Come on, focus, damn you. Whatever, it says it on there. So we're gonna go ahead, get this car back up on jack stands, drop the tank, and just essentially step number one is drop the tank, pull all the old fuel shit out. You don't need any of the original lines whatsoever, so just get rid of them. You can either just cut them, tug them out of the way, or I believe these, just like the Fox body, they're going to be riveted in. So, you know, pick your poison. I'm probably just going to do the little snippy snip method, just where they're not in the way anymore, and then remove the old fuel pump assembly and start running my new fuel lines. Alright, so here is the gas tank that I removed and some of the fuel lines right there. I think that's pretty much as far in depth as I'm going to go into, removing this stuff. But, so pull out your old pump, and you definitely want to drain the tank as much as possible, because inside we do have this little plastic piece that we are going to have to break out of there. It's somehow glued pretty damn well, so I'm gonna need two hands, so I'll do this off camera, and then I'll show you how it looks once it's all taken off. Alright, and after about 45 minutes of prying and pulling, you will get all the plastic out. So, just make sure that you do your best to not use dirty tools or anything like that. Just, we want to keep the fuel tank as clean as possible, but this is what's at the bottom. So this piece of sheet metal, sheet metal, dang, tongue twister there, but it's just pretty much fused into the plastic, so you kind of got to break the plastic off and then slowly work your way around. Once you get one of these little spot welds broken off, they slowly become easier. Once you get two on the same side, that's when you can really break the other two off really easily. So this metal, you pretty much just gotta fatigue it, so you just gotta keep working it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it'll eventually fatigue right at the weld and just snap off. So that's my tech tip. Get a good pair of pliers. I would say maybe even some really long needle noses would probably be very beneficial to have if I were to do this again. If this was my own personal car, I would just do what I did with my own personal car, which was just buy an 0304 Cobra tank. Because the 0304 Cobra tanks already have this style of fuel hat, so they actually have a little baffle inside that really helps with fuel slosh. But again, this isn't no crazy corner carver. It's just a street car. This will be 100% fine. So now let's go ahead and move and over to the fuel hat, build that, and get it sitting in here. Alright, so it's another day in the garage. Continuing on the fuel system, we got our fuel level sender. So if you're curious on the part number, there it is. A fresh gasket, and also a fresh grommet for the tank filler neck. So pretty much what we got to do next is get this level sensor on here, because the one that was in the car was the incorrect style. So the style that you're looking for is this one. So essentially it clips on. The one that came out of the car just was a different style, so I had to get this one. Alright, so when you get your sensor, it's going to be attached to this. So you're going to have to remove this little backing plate and install it on the Floor Innovations one. So what's nice about the Floor Innovations one is that it'll literally line up. The only small little modification I had to make to mine, and I think it's just a variation, maybe the end of this little rod was mushroomed. I did have to drill it out just to one size bigger, to a 7/64. So 3/32 is about the rough size that hole was, so I just had to go 1/32 on the size up. So keep that in mind, or maybe I could have just shaved off, kind of deburred the end of this little rod, but that was giving me issues. It should only go pretty much one way, but if you don't know, just make sure your wire is pointed up, and your float should essentially be parallel to the bottom of the tank. Alright, now we should be able to connect it and install it. Also, just wanted to give one more quick note to For Innovations. Like, not only did they supply the correct blade connector inside of here, this is also heat shrink. So once you're done with it, you can just shrink her down and have a nice, clean, and secure fit at the end of the day. Oh, look at that. See if I can get this thing to focus. Nice and clean and secure. Alright, now we can install it. Also, I kind of did want to show the type of fuel level sender that the Mustang had. So this is the factory one, what I believe, because I don't think it's ever been changed out. So this is the factory float. That is, I guess, the newer style from LMR. So if you ever need to change your floats out, just kind of be mindful. You might end up with this one, or you might end up with one of those that comes on a plate of this. So maybe this is just a revision or an update to the part, because it does say it's for a 9904 fuel tank. So food for thought. Okay, so we have our For Innovations fuel hat bolted into the tank. So now your next step is going to be to mount your fuel filter. So this is kind of like where I mounted mine. This area was already kind of dented, but if you look at it, it sits just barely higher than this subframe connector. So I know this will hit probably around the same time that this will hit, so it'll at least have some kind of structural rigidity there to help it. If not, I could come in and weld something a little bit thicker around it, but you know, your exhaust is going to bottom out way before you bottom out on one of these. So there you can kind of see, like, you're going to be hitting some other expensive stuff before this guy. So pretty much our next step is to start routing fuel lines back. So what I did was I did want to mount the muffler. So this is going to be our fresh exhaust that we're going to be running. And what I did was I just took a step drill bit, made 2 holes, and then with the angle grinder came in, cut it, and then just cleaned it up with an air grinder and a Dremel bit on it. So I will be putting a little bit of a rubber grommet around here. Probably, I don't know what I'm going to be using just yet. Probably some vacuum hose, just to it doesn't have a sharp edge because it can't even cut through like my glove or anything, but just to prevent any kind of future chafing on there. So my plan is to follow the factory e-brake cable out the top, go into the trans tunnel and back towards where the fuel tank is at. So our 2 fuel lines will come in through here and come out through there, and then I will be putting just a little bit of heat shielding on them, just where it sits above the muffler. Once it kind of gets into the drive shaft tunnel, I think it should be fine. It should have plenty of space away from the muffler. It's just this area, since it's just trapped air, it's just going to be having like a lot of radiating heat right there. So that little area, it will get a little bit of heat shielding. So I think the best course of action is probably going to cut a rough length of hose to the fuel filter and then mount a hose fitting onto the end of what's left of the hose for the return line, connect them to the tank, pop the tank back up, and that way we can do the finished cuts further up front in the engine bay. Alright, so I got everything essentially final plumbed, so it's gonna go up and over the panhard bar. So these are your wires. The original grommet is gonna get reused for those wires to come through the hole here. So all I'm gonna do is just slice this guy open so I can pass the wires through, and then it should be a perfect little grommet right there for all our wires and our wiring to sit inside here in the wheel tub. So moving forward from the tank, we were able to tuck them up nice and high. Maybe we might put one more little P-clamp up there just to hold everything up against the body where the original fuel filter sat. So we got tons of space there. Along the factory fuel lines, we're going to dip in through here where the e-brake comes in and then pop out through here. So this still needs just a little bit of vacuum line to prevent it from chafing. Forward, and here underneath the passenger seat is where I mounted the fuel filter using some rivnets through the body, and that gives us some nice threads. And just using some M6 Allen head screws got us bolted up right there. So moving forward, we're going to come in through here, follow all this factory routing up and over into the engine bay, and I kind of already fit everything up, but this is essentially where everything's going to live. I should have a little bit more of a gap with the filter. It's just that everything's kind of loose right now, but once everything's bolted down and firm, it should give me just enough room. And then this 45 from here will get us to the opposite rail, crossover, and then I already have this one made for the high pressure fuel pump. So this should mimic factory fuel rails. All right, so taking a break from the fuel system, tomorrow I'll finish the engine side of the fuel lines. I just need to make 2 more. I have barely enough fuel lines, so for right now we're going to be playing with the drive shaft. So this is your stock GT one. This is the Cobra one. So this is a stock one. They come stock with aluminum ones, which is pretty cool. The only downside is your pinion mount. So this is the GT one, and here it is next to the Cobra one. So it's a lot smaller, so your bolt pattern will not line up. Unfortunately, the Cobra uses 1550 style U-joints, so they're a lot bigger than the factory GT ones. So what you need to do is go ahead and get yourself one of these guys. Let me try and find the box that I threw over here. So this is made by Spicer. You can buy it on Summit, 5648X. So essentially it's a 1530 to 1550 Spicer unit, so it'll fit Cobra drive shaft. And then stand that guy up and then turn it 90 degrees without losing one of these guys. Be very careful, because these guys, they love to pop out, and then you'll be spending all night searching for them. So that guy fits on there beautifully. And then luckily it also comes with, you know, a fresh Zerk fitting and some fresh clips for it. So I'm gonna go ahead and install these guys onto the new aluminum drive shaft, and then we'll get to test fit it on there, and hopefully we don't have any clearance issues where I ran those fuel lines. Alrighty, and we got our drive shaft installed. So we officially have connection between the T56 to the drive shaft to the rear end. So now we actually have a complete drivetrain in the car. So only thing left to get now is to grab our X-pipe and our catback. Alright, I'm starting to run out of boxes to open. So here's our X-pipe to catback setup that we got. So it is a BBK X-pipe that's for a coyote swap, so it matches the headers, and that puts your catback section in the factory location. So any factory catback will work. So for factory catbacks, we are running a Bassani 3-inch catbacks. So thank God it has those little high flow cats, because this thing's going to be ungodly loud. Because looking at these mufflers, I don't know how crazy loud they are going to be. I think they are very similar to my car, and my car is actually pretty tame. But this being a Gen 3, I don't know how it's going to, you know, act on cold start, especially with a factory tune. And then that paired up with a set of, I believe those are 3.5-inch polished tips. So they look fantastic. I'm not going to pull them out of the bag because I do not want to scratch them. That'll be the very last thing to install. So let's get the X-pipe on, then start fitting up these pipes, because the car does have a panhard bar, so fitting these pipes is going to be tricky. Alright, well, it's actually a few days later, but we actually have the exhaust fitted up. So, I actually essentially jinxed myself when I said that this exhaust is meant to fit a factory catback, right? So, factory catback's like 2-inch, so these come as a 2.5-inch ball flange. So I had to get these adapters that are 3-inch to the 2.5-inch catback exhaust, using the pulley that I have no clue where it went. There you are. So these were just a hair undersized for my setup. So what I did was I took an old supercharger pulley, put it on there, and there you go. Little hack, I just needed to open up just a smidge just to really make it fit the exhaust, just because it was like right on the ragged edge. So now what I'm doing is cutting off the excess. This will also get trimmed. Here's the old 2.5-inch ball flange. This is the 3.5-inch to 2.5-inch pipe. And essentially what I'm going to do is I marked exactly where I want my flange to be. And then from there, I'll cut this as well, and then just slide my zip tie back, make my new mark, and then weld her up. So this will be 100% perfectly modified for the car, and it'll seal just fine with no crazy exhaust clamps or restrictions in the exhaust. So literally will be zero difference whatsoever. All we're doing is just making it a little bit shorter and just putting the correct flange on it. So these were like 20 bucks on Amazon, so not a huge killer in the wallet. Alright, so it is a couple days. So we did run into a couple issues with the exhaust. So this is made for a factory X pipe or H pipe that is about 2.5-inch thick. The new X pipe is 3-inch. So the ball flange was not going to work. So the pipe was too long. And then 2, this flange was meant for 2.5. So what I did was ordered some 3-inch collector to 2.5-inch pipe, essentially cut them, tacked it in to test fit, and then we also got the over the axle pipes installed. So those did require us removing the upper control arms and the panhard bore, and it looks like they're barely gonna squeeze through. So, looking at my operation over here, essentially what I did was I ordered these. So if you want to, these are expanded, so I could essentially slide them on, but they're too long, right? Because there is a bend here. So what I'm doing is I'm just cutting off the expanded side, making it as short as possible. And then I test fitted the exhaust. I put a mark on there, and then I used a zip tie, because the zip tie will give me a nice straight line all the way across, because it'll lay flat up against the pipe. So that is my no further than line. So once I cut this, that's essentially what I'm going to use as a reference to put a second zip tie over here, and that will actually be my cut line. So once I cut it down, I'll tack it, fit it, and then essentially there should be zero restriction, zero difference between this just bolting up to the factory flange versus, you know, this 3-inch. It'll probably kill just a smidge of power, but again, this isn't an all-out, you know, NA build. This is just going to be a nice cruiser. So next is to cut this guy, tack it, and fit it to this. So again, I have my no-go flange side, and then once I cut it shorter, I'll figure out where to cut this one. Alright, and this is essentially what you should end up with, using that little bit of zip tie method just to get those nice clean straight lines, because kind of trying to do it freehand, I always end up oblonging it. But looks like we got a nice tight gap, and the pipe fits perfect. So I'm just gonna mark it so I know where to fit it up to, and then just finish cleaning up those little burrs on the inside. So there you go. So I'm gonna tack this, install the rest of the exhaust, test fit everything. And unfortunately I can't weld this up tonight because I am out of argon. So hopefully on Monday I'll be able to get some more and then just wrap up these little welds real quick, and then we'll have a full exhaust on. Alright, and it's a couple days later, so I was able to get the mufflers welded up finally after I got some argon. So all of those got welded up nicely, and it looks like the exhaust is actually fitting up really nice. We got plenty of air around the bumper, and we still got to clock this. Still got to tighten one more clamp, but I'm waiting for the hanger for the exhaust tip on the driver's side. But even with the panhard bar, it looks like we are just barely going to clear everything. So everything is a tight fit on this car. But there you can kind of see like how the exhaust set. Don't look at my welds, they are not the best. I have not practiced in a while, so everything tucked up really nicely. So yeah, so there you go. There's the full fuel system and exhaust install in one video. So if you're curious about how to run the lines and everything, that's how I did it. So pretty much just came out the tank, through the trans tunnel, followed where that's some heat shielding for the hoses. Essentially just followed the e-brake cable, punched it through, and then sent it forward. This still needs to, you know, get clamped and snugged up. So I still do have a little bit of loose hoses in here, but nothing a little clamp can't fix. One of the little P clamps. So everything will tuck up really nicely. See, I was using zip ties to help kind of hold everything in place as I routed everything, so I could get a nice fit and finish on everything. So the regulator ended up right here next to the air filter. Everything barely clears, like half a finger's width, and then we cross over, go to our fuel rails, come through the back, passenger side fuel rail, and then from there we feed the high pressure fuel pump. So there you go. Next is going to be doing some wiring and some coolant issues that we still got to solve. So I still have to cut a hose on this side and route, well, I gotta go find another heater hose for the driver's side, but I still gotta route the heater core lines, the lower radiator hose, repair not repair, but modify the upper radiator hose so it fits with the cold air intake here, and get everything set up. So yeah. Alright, well, catch y'all later. Also, if you were curious about the wiring, all I did was just kind of cut this open and kind of hog it out with like a giant drill bit, so the fuel pump wires would fit. And then I took the existing wiring down here and essentially cut where the pump went and tapped in for the fuel gauge straight to the, don't know if you can see it, but it's that little yellow wire there. That gets tapped into this guy, and then of course this guy gets plugged in to the body harness, and now your fuel gauge will work. So next video I will go over all the wiring for everything, for the entire control pack, including the lethal Nate wiring harness. So yeah, so if you got any questions on that, ask them below, and then I'll try and address it in the next video.